Good night, and welcome back. Thank you if you've been with us most of the day. It's been quite an intense day. We've had really good conversations about how to level up your networking skills, cultivating meaningful relationships. We've talked AI, we've talked money. Oh my God, it's been insane. And lastly, kind of highlight of the evening is we're going to be talking portfolio careers with I think a man that doesn't need much introduction. Pat Young. Most of us know you, and for those of us who don't, which is kind of insane because you've been around. Not, I was going to say you've been around for a long time, and that sounds a bit rude, like I'm suggesting that you're old. But you've been,
Ah, ah.
you're a veteran,
Since the
King.
dinosaurs, as my kids would
Since
say.
since Jesus was a lad, so you've been around since Jesus was a lad. You have quite an illustrious career. You have kind of headed up the BBC, Travel Channel, you've done it all, and I think you're the master of kind of portfolio careers. Before we kind of jump into portfolio careers, do you want to just give a quick whistle stop tour of your career if you can, because it's quite a career for
Do
those
a
who might.
whistle stop version. Thank you for the very generous introduction. Good evening, everybody. Hope you enjoy the session. You get more out if you ask more questions. So I'm leaving a lot of time for questions because then you can get what you want to get out of it.
100.
So my name's Pat Young. I'm the older and less famous brother of Gary Young, the Guardian journalist, and I've had a 30-year career in TV. Started at London Weekend, working in local news and current affairs. Like many people of my generation, brought in because they wanted to do a show on Brixton 10 years after the first set of riots in 1981, and they didn't have any black people on the team, and that was
Wow.
my way into TV. While I was there, I helped create a show called Devil's Advocate with Darcus Howe. I then went to the BBC to be a local on-screen journalist. I saw there were two men called Trevor Phillips and McDonald making all the money, and I thought I'll have a bit of that on-screen love. I really hated it, really, really hated it, partly because even though I was working for BBC Newsroom Southeast, I was told that I didn't have a cut glass accent, and they put me into elocution lessons at the age of 30.
Wow.
So went off screen, created Black Britain with Maxine Watson, Sandy Smith, and others, and then went to work. I've worked at Channel 4, worked at BBC Sport. I ran an American cable network for 5 years before coming back and running BBC in-house. I then left that in 2014 and set up a consultancy working in digital before creating one of five people who created a company called Sugar Films in 2016-17. Over time, that we reduced in number, and that became Cardiff Productions. And I left Cardiff Productions in 2022, partly because my sort of move into a portfolio career was quite advanced, and I couldn't give Cardiff Productions the amount of time and energy that it needed. So my life now, I'm a non-executive director working for ITV Studios. I work for Julian Bellamy, the chief executive or the MD of ITV Studios. I consult for him. I am the chair of Cardiff University, my alma mater, where I studied 40 years ago, which is a big institution, 600 million in revenues, 7,000 staff, 30,000 students. I have my own company called Skin in the Game Studios, where I work on some of my own projects. I'm working on some collaborations with others, including Maxine Watson. And I've invested in Unedited, which is a podcast company. And I sort of do some behind the scenes stuff on over the top, under the radar. Plus, I'm the treasurer of the Old Actonians under 12 football team.
Wow.
And when you talk about portfolios, some of it is about getting the work-life balance, and that has become part of it for me.
Wow. Well, that is quite an extensive range. And so essentially that's what a portfolio career is. Just explain, just doing various different
Yeah,
things. What?
well,
Yeah.
I mean, when I was at the BBC, which was my last proper job, I would get up every day. I'd have to be there at 10. I was expected to be there till 6 or 7. I'd be expected to do some late shifts. I'd be expected to work in the evenings. And it was all for the BBC, and I got a very good salary for it, but that was my world. In this world, I was in a meeting yesterday with Julian at ITV about what they can do to boost the black indie sector. Tomorrow I'm going to Cardiff because I've got meetings at the university. Today I've been dealing with a lawyer over a project that Maxine and I are trying to work on. So I'm now in a space where I do lots of different things. It has opportunities, but it has challenges, and you need to navigate your way through them.
Yeah, and we want to talk both about opportunities and challenges. Kind of, we had a conversation earlier on, and someone said they were a multi-hyphenate creative, and I hear that these are kind of words that are being bandied about a lot more. Is kind of, do you find more people are kind of leaning into the more portfolio lifestyle career? Are you noticing that, and particularly with the downturn?
I notice it for two reasons. One is my age. I am 60, and we have to get out of the way so that the next generation can have their space and their fun, and that's cool. Secondly, because more and more work in this world is less and less secure. It's tough enough when you're a freelancer in the old world, but we're almost like it. I think freelance work in TV now is a bit like the precariat, a bit like being a Deliveroo rider. Feast and famine. If your face fits, if people know who you are, and so some people are being sort of pushed into this work in order to just keep the lights on. But if it would help, can I give you 5 principles that people need to think about as they consider a
Absolutely.
portfolio?
Yes, please.
So I think the first one is, are you ready to say goodbye to the old you? Those of us who work in television are not like barristers, lawyers, accountants, solicitors. We don't have a professional qualification that underpins everything that we do. So if you're a barrister, you can stop working at this chamber and go to that chamber, and you're still a barrister, and you can set up privately, and you're still a barrister. You can do what you want. My last job was chief creative officer because somebody called me the chief creative officer. They could have called me an executive producer. They could have called me the ultimate creative officer. All of our status in TV is tied to a title, which is tied to a role. There is no professional qualification that underpins it. And for some people, giving up that status of being, oh, I'm a TV producer and I'm an exec producer is too much. They don't want to give that up in order to do lots of different things. So the first thing you have to be very clear about in your own mind is you're prepared to give up some of the status and some of the security that goes with it. And that's hard for some people are being forced into it. It's not a choice. But if they don't find comfort with where they are, then what they do next is sort of tainted by the fact that they're not doing it by choice, they're doing it out of necessity. And I would argue that that isn't, I mean, that has elements of what I would call a portfolio career, but it's much more just work, fractional work, as opposed to a different way of organizing your life. Second thing you have to ask yourself is, what do you want to get out of it? So what I get out of my portfolio career is I can play in lots of different spaces. So my work with ITV is working with a $2 billion company, which is you know complex, big organization within UK broadcasting. My work at the university, which is unpaid, is because it was the university I went to, and I believe universities have transformational powers for people's lives. My life was changed by going to university, and I want to help my university help more people have their lives transformed. I chair a pressure group called the British Broadcasting Challenge because I believe public service broadcasting is really, really important. And if you look at the United States, you can see what's gone wrong there because they don't have a BBC or even an ITV or Channel 4. So you have to understand what it is you want to get out of it if you're really going to make a portfolio work, because then you can do things which are unpaid but interesting, things that fuel other passions, other parts of your life. The third one, and I think TV people are not very good at this, is working out what have you got to offer.
Mm.
People say, "Oh, I'm a producer," but actually, being a producer means you can create teams, you can provide vision, you can manage a budget, you can manage a schedule, you can manage risk. As well as you're creative and other, you can tell a story. The number of organizations out there that want people who can help them tell their story is off the charts. And that is a story, it's a skill that many of us have. but most of us don't realize that we have. Other sorts of non-exec work can be in the areas of finance, in terms of operations, in terms of management. Non-exec work can include, or portfolio work could include not working. Your portfolio might be, I only want to work 4 days a week, and 1 day a week, I want to do some needlework, some pottery. I want to read books. I want to go walking. Understanding what you want to get out of it, and then what skills you've got. 2 and 3. The number 4 I've already alluded to. Not all portfolio work is paid. And you need to decide whether you need to have a fully paid portfolio, or your portfolio has a mixture of paid and unpaid activity. And that will very much depend on your economics and your life stage and your obligations. But if you're thinking about portfolio as a career as opposed to something you've been forced into, that is, you have an opportunity to think about, do I want to do this for the experience? Do I want to do this because I might learn something? And the last one you have to think about is, how do people find you? Most of us, we're all out there, and yet we're invisible because everybody's out there. So is your LinkedIn totally up to date? Have you got a website in your own name that's easily searchable? Have you got a CV that's up to date and sort of in shape? There are places like gov.uk. The government offers non-executive work, a lot of it paid, where they're looking just for grown-up people who are sort of public-spirited, prison parole boards. There are all sorts of paid opportunities out there, which is portfolio type work, non-executive work that are paid. Sometimes you have to go looking for it. It doesn't naturally come to you. And you also have to think a bit long term. So when I did my first sort of piece of my portfolio, which was, I was a governor at the University of West London, which is a mile from my house. I did that because I wanted to get experience of sitting on a board. It was a mile from my house, so it wasn't very onerous to me. And it was in the area of education, and as you know, I believe it's transformative. It was because I did that I got my other work, because I was able to point to 6 years of board level work as a trustee of a large charity. So that then when other work comes along, people say, well, he obviously understands what he needs to do because he's got the experience over here. So sometimes you have to sort of think. So you might, for example, today, can you go down to a 4-day week and take on a university governorship somewhere? So that in 2 years' time, you've got 2 years of experience, and maybe you can go to 3 days and you can take on something else. So, those are my sort of 5 tips. Are you ready to change? Do you know what it is you want to get out of it? How do people find you? What do you have to offer? And, just remember that there's paid and unpaid opportunities.
I mean, that's really powerful and really kind of good kind of starting points to get people thinking. I think a lot of people, and like you say, that particularly as you kind of get older and you've got such a value of font of experience, that it becomes easier to find these opportunities. But a lot of younger people are now kind of thinking about portfolio careers as a way forward. How do you start kind of building, like you were saying? Is it like you said, just take the 1 day off and start looking at those opportunities? How do you start building a portfolio career? But it seems to go against what the industry says, isn't it? Oftentimes people are nervous about having lots of different things on their CV because it becomes hard to explain to potential recruiters their story of their work. So how do you navigate that if choosing to do
Well, as I said, there's 2 ways of looking at that. If what you're looking for is work because you've got to pay the bills, I wouldn't call that a portfolio career. I would call that fractional working. I would call that you're doing what you need to do, like our parents did 2 and 3 jobs to keep the lights on. That's, to me, that's what that space is. I think a portfolio career is where you make a deliberate decision not to have all of your eggs in one particular basket, but instead consciously go out and identify 2, 3, 4, 5 different things to do with your working day. I mean, part of it is you have to be organized. I mean, I actually have to pay somebody to manage my diary just to make sure I get to the right places at the right time. You need to have all of your sort of digital footprint set up, your website, You have to understand how you want people to contact you, because you're totally wide open. Anybody can get to you at any time. But you've got to, as a career, you've got to really want to do it. That's why I say you have to say goodbye to being the old you. I know there are a lot of people out there who are just, because they're being offered 2 days on this shoot, 1 day on that shoot, 2 days on that shoot. Well, how do you manage that? Get the best rate you can. Make sure you're known to all of the people who do the bookings. And if you get a good booking, try and keep it and try and expand from 2 to 3 to 4 to 5. I'm talking about people who maybe said, you know what, TV, you've had the best of me, or I just can't work in an industry which is that insecure. I love it, but I can't put all of my eggs in that basket. So this industry is going to get 2 of my eggs, but these other 3, I need to find something else. Well, where do I go to find those other fractional things which aren't in TV? And that's what I would call a portfolio.
In terms of like given this kind of skill set, and you kind of talked a little bit about it earlier on, like producers, budget, they can, you know, organize stuff, project manage budgets, all that kind of good stuff. What are kind of good places to start looking if you want to expand your portfolio? If you're thinking about doing a portfolio career, where are some of the good places that you can kind of start? And I know you talked about university and non-executive roles, but are there other places that you can start looking to
Yeah,
expand?
I mean, start with what you love. If you want to spend more time, I mean, let's just say you got 5 days, you want to spend 1 day reading. Okay. Then how do you make that reading experience? Nobody's going to pay you to read unless you're able to read scripts and get paid for it, in which case that may be a way of monetizing that. But really, you can either contact the organizations that you're interested in doing stuff for, headhunters. Send your CV to headhunters and say, I mean, I was talking to one just today called Nurole, Nurole. You can just register your CV with them, and people come to them saying, I'm looking for this, that, and the other. And your CV, you know, if it's appropriate, your CV will come up in front of them. There are lots of headhunters. I mean, this is one of those moments where being black is a definite advantage. A number of companies are looking to diversify their boards. If I look at the people on the board at Cardiff University, we've got people from media, we've got people from digital technology, we've got people from building and housing, we've got somebody who works in the university sector, we've got an accountant from Welsh Water, a senior accountant from Welsh Water. We have a range of skills. And so to take these, some of these boards are just looking for good people. Because what's your role, especially if you're looking for a paid non-exec role? I mean, what they're looking for is intelligent people who can offer them insights that they don't have. So I'm talking to somebody at the moment about something, and I've said to them, I don't know your sector very well at all. And they said, that's okay, because we know it really well. We don't need somebody who knows our sector. We need people who know other things, and we all know other things. So, but it's about understanding that these roles are there for us too. National Theatre, National Opera, these places all have boards. All of these boards have non-executive members. Some of them are paid, some of them are unpaid. All of these passions that we have, Tate Modern, Tate Museum, these are all things that we can do as part of a non-executive career. But you have to sort of elevate your sights and go looking for them.
Go looking for. We just had a really quick question from Bellish.
Yep.
Do you remind us of the resource? I think it was was it Nurole? Did you say?
Nurole.
Yeah, was it Nurole that you said? I think it was a recruitment agency that you was talking to that people could register. Yeah, Nurole.
That's just one of many. There are lots of them. Perrott Laver, lots of these companies. If you Google headhunters in the UK and then go onto their websites, most of them are looking for candidates, and that's how you have to present yourself.
Is there a kind of optimum number of roles that you should be managing at one time, or is it kind of, I suppose it's as long as a piece of string, but have you found kind of during your time navigating a portfolio career, there's an optimum number of projects that anyone should have at any one time?
Yeah, the reason I have Philippa, who organises me, is that my wife realised that being a portfolio person, everybody can get to you. You got no barrier between you and the world. So, and you don't want to miss an opportunity. So you read everything that sort of comes in, and before you know it, you're chewing up your time just doing the admin of staying afloat. Um, so you do have to be sort of really be good at your time management. I have a system. I give 2 days a week to Cardiff University. So the university, whether I go to Cardiff or I'm in London, I'm doing things online or I'm reading papers, 2 days a week. Done. That means I spend 1 day a week sort of looking at my ITV stuff, and then the other 2 days I spend doing like unedited and the work I'm doing with Maxine and things like that. Now they're not whole days. I don't just sit here for a whole day and just do Cardiff, but in my head, that's it. And before I take on anything else, I have to be honest with myself about what I'm going to drop. So you have to sort of, in your head, you have to say how much time, because when you go for these roles, they'll tell you how much time, four meetings a year or 1 day a month. Well, I'd normally double what they say it's going to be, and then work from there. But you need to. There's nothing worse than getting a reputation for being flaky or unreliable, because that also gets round. And when you go for the next thing, they will phone up the places you've been before and they say, yeah, he was a great booking, but he was never, and I've been a trustee of organizations earlier on when I was still doing my 5 day a week job, where really I was trustee in name only. And I look back at that time now and think, yeah, that was disappointing of me. I didn't think it through enough to give it my all.
Yeah, to kind of show up in a real kind of way. When you present yourself and you're kind of looking at these opportunities, do you present yourself as, I'm Simone and I'm a portfolio career? Do you know what I mean? Or are you just
Yeah,
kind of
if
presenting
I
yourself
was you, I
without?
would say, hi, my name's Simone. I'm a young entrepreneur. My background's in media, but I've got skills in lots of other areas. I'm a parent, and
Mm,
I'm keen to contribute.
right. So
But I
just
would
simple.
also those aim for those areas that you want to be in. So you'll have your narrative worked out for you. When I turned up at University of West London and I said, look, university changed my life and I want to help change the lives of many people as possible, it became very clear why I was sat there. It wasn't like I had to do a whole speech or.
Kind of. So I suppose that because we're so used to trying to sell ourselves in the industry, it sounds so easy to just go up to somebody and say, listen, I'm this person, I love what you're doing, and I want to contribute because this is passionate to me. That seems such a far, so far removed from how we're experiencing the media industry. Once you've kind of got that experience, how do you navigate your way around the media industry, navigate working on particular jobs or productions? Does the portfolio career mean that you kind of have to let up some of this, like you were saying, kind of let go as your identity as a TV producer? Because I know like the industry can be really fickle and really worried. Like I think lots of people, particularly in this moment, are really scared about doing other stuff because it means that they can't come back. So how do you navigate? What advice do you have for that?
Look, my view on where the industry is at the moment is we're going through a massive correction, and there will not be as much work in the future in terms of traditional TV as there has been in the past. That's my worldview of what's going on at the moment. When Netflix was spending, and their subs are going up and up and up, and everybody was chasing Netflix to get more subs, we had this massive spending boom. We couldn't get. Remember that period 2 years ago, post COVID, when people were talking about staff shortages. We couldn't
Yeah.
get people, and then what happened was Netflix subs stopped going up, and the stock exchange said, "Hang on a minute, if their subs aren't going up anymore, are they profitable?" And it all became about profit. And Netflix said, well, to get to profit, we'll cut 6 billion from our expenditure. And then Warner Brothers, who are already going through a merger, said, okay, it's about profitability. We need to spend less. Disney took 7 billion out of their spending. Today, Paramount have announced that they are taking billions out of their expenditure. And that's all because their streaming businesses are rushing now to be profitable, not to grow, but to be profitable. It used to be growth at any cost. Now it's profitability. And the quickest way to profitability is to cut cost.
Mm.
The second thing that happened is we've had a recession. That means there's less advertising money. That means there's less money in the free-to-air markets. And the public broadcasters have all had their budgets cut as well. And the third thing that happens, we had the writers' strike, which for the networks meant it was good news because they didn't have to spend money on content while they're rushing to get to profitability. But also what they realized was that these big streaming platforms with these massive libraries didn't need as many original hours as they've been commissioning to keep their numbers up. So they cut their spending even more. So if you look at that in aggregate, I can't believe we're ever going to go back to the levels of demand for content that we had 5 years ago. I personally just don't see it.
But there's still an insatiable demand for content. The audiences have an insatiable demand for content. So how do we
There
meet
is,
that?
but it's increasingly delivered by big companies who can do it with economies of scale, and some of it even taking on the risk because the broadcasters don't want to pay. I mean, what's really happening is small and medium-sized companies are being squeezed by the really big companies. And most of our people are in small and medium-sized companies or on the margins of the big companies. And that's why we're feeling this squeeze particularly acutely at the moment. So I think for some people, to protect themselves, their family, their mental health, some people should be thinking about, is TV the career for me? Or is TV full time the career for me? Maybe there's a way I can do television where, I have an arrangement. Maybe I do a particular show and I do it for so many months. But then I don't spend the rest of my time hightailing around trying to find the next show because I've got other things that can sustain me. Or maybe I do a shift, I do 2 shifts in the newsroom for 2 days, and that gives me a base level of income. And the rest of the time, I look for other things that could pay me. I mean, some of these gov.uk jobs, they're a day a month, and it's like 15,000 pounds.
Mm,
That's worth doing.
mm.
So there are other ways that you can skin a rabbit. And I just think that I'm not sure it's good for people's mental health to sort of keep chasing a diminishing game.
Mm. What do you think the new normal in TV will look like? I mean, that you say reduced,
I think a
just reduced.
number of very big companies, a small number of very, very big companies who may then have their own little label structures inside of them, and then some boutique lifestyle type businesses with, certainly they may employ 10, 15, 20 people max. But it's the days of I've got a company, I'm going to build a slate, I'm going to sell it for 5 times profit in six. That day, I think, has gone for most. I don't see that coming back because the companies now, which are so small, just won't get a seat at the table. It's really, really hard for them.
Mm. So how do you
Depressing.
explain it really is, but it's real, and we kind of appreciate your candor. How do smaller independents or smaller production companies, smaller creators, those that don't fit into that big, big production ecosystem, how do they get their content to market? Because people still want content, but still want stories. So how do they get that out there, or how do they weather the storm? Apart from obviously considering portfolio careers, but how in this space do they start to
I
navigate?
think they may, at the moment, small companies are seen as risky. Yeah, which is why even when a small company has a good idea, they get partnered with a big one.
Mhm, mhm,
So I think what we can do to de-risk things helps. So I know there was a session earlier about audio. Can you pilot something in audio to show that it works and to show there's an audience for it? And if you can do that, that may help you when you knock on the door of television. So when I was at BBC Comedy, even the BBC's done this for a long time, we would do comedy pilots on audio for 15K. much, a quarter of the price of a television pilot. And if it worked on radio, you could then say, okay, that's the shape of the show. We can see which characters do and don't work. It makes the television commission that bit less risky. Maxine and I did a pilot with unedited on the Sarah Rector story. Sarah Rector being this young black girl. I didn't know this, but Native Americans had African American slaves. And Sarah Rector was one of these African Americans who was born in Native American slavery. And when the American government broke up the reservations, they gave them all plots of land, and her land had oil in it, and she became a multi-millionairess. And we thought that's a great story. So we did it as an audio podcast so that we could try and take it to TV networks and say, here's the story, because they don't get the story if it's on paper. Here's the story, here's how we want to tell it. It's still out there, it's still being listened to. We haven't yet got a bite, but I think it's been a more creative, productive way of trying to get that story told than doing it on a piece of paper and sending it in and them not getting it. And so I think, creating your own IP, whether that's through audio, there's some great graphic novels out there which are being self-published. Can you identify a great young graphic novelist? Talk to them, option their work. A lot of people now relying on intellectual property. So optioning books, optioning articles in newspapers, and using that as the basis to get in the door. So there are things that you can do that make you a bit less risky. If you option a great article from a newspaper, or people have optioned podcasts, that by optioning it, you'd get the right to tell the story, and you get the right to all of that research. And it means that the person you're pitching it to, you can just say, here's the podcast series. You don't have to worry about what the story is, because we can give it to you. You can listen to it. And here's how we're going to tell it for TV. So there are things that you can do. You can, we were talking about this earlier, learn to shoot on a mobile phone.
Yeah.
So that you've got different ways of making content, or you're making content in different places. Some people I know just sit down and work on formats, and they don't want to make them. They just want to think up a format and pitch it. And if the broadcaster likes it, the broadcaster can give it to one of its big companies to make. They're not interested in having all the complexity of running a big production company. They just want to think up formats, try and sell them, and make sure that they get the economics without having to do all of the bits that other people are better used to. We just got to think slightly differently, and sometimes being small, could help. Maybe some of us need to come together to, it's hard to do this on your own, hard to brainstorm on your own, for example. But if 2 or 3 people could come together and brainstorm together and agree that, maybe this week I host the brainstorm and you help me with my idea, and the next week I'm going to come to your brainstorm and you decide what it's about, and we've got to find new ways of collaborating to try and sort of generate ideas that are going to cut through. But we just have to be honest that it's a really difficult market.
Yeah, no, I think that's true. You spoke a lot about kind of the audio world and podcasts and using podcasts as a tool for development, which I totally agree with, and I've seen more and more people do that. Do you think that the same is true for the digital space, like your YouTubes and the digital?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. And that's how Issa Rae got going. She absolutely got going by using the digital space. There's a great it's slightly old now, but there was a great show called Video Game High School. And Video Game High School, basically, it was a drama set in a high school for the world's elite video gamers. And what was clever about it was you'd have a normal American high school drama, but also these people would be involved in multiplayer games because they're all elite gamers. And within the games, they'd be playing characters. So for the purpose of this exercise, Simone, in real life at this high school, you and I were boyfriend and girlfriend. But then in the game, maybe I kill your character. And then when we come out of the game, you've got a beef with me for killing your character in the game. So it was
Okay.
quite clever that you could have these parallel. And that was done by these two guys. They raised $70,000 on Kickstarter, and the crowd paid for series one. And series one was a massive success. It was watched by, I don't know, 15 million people. They even made the 15-minute episodes into one sort of 90-minute DVD, and they sold that through Amazon. And then instead of going to the broadcast and asking for money to do series two, they went back to Kickstarter and said, "You love the first series. Now give us the money to do another one." And the people gave them the money to do series two as well. And they did 3 series without putting their own hand in their pockets at all. But the crowd paid for it. You know, maybe with projects, people should go to the crowd and say, "Help me fund this development." You know, you can do it through that sort of mechanism, or you can sort of professionalize that, and you can say to investors, yeah, invest in, here's my drama idea. If you like it, give me 8, 10, 15, 20,000 pounds for a script so I can pay a decent writer to write it. And if it gets commissioned, you can have 10% of the profit. You know, we just got to be more agile in how we think. And I try and identify funding sources in different places. Because I think waiting for the traditional broadcasters to give us the access and then have the confidence to let us do what we want to do. I mean, it's changing, but it is so painfully slow that it isn't going to get us through the period that I see, certainly for the next 3 to 4 years.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that, like you say, the importance of IP. I've been often having these conversations that the kind of day of having a long slate of programs kind of gone, and maybe we just, like you said, put our energies in different places, marketing it online or
But
yeah,
also, look, we read different books to what most of them are reading. Yeah, we see different. We live in different spaces. We that we can have the confidence to read a book and think that's really good. It doesn't cost the earth to option a book, and that gives you a year, 18 months to try and then build the package around it to get it done. But it starts with, I mean, people have even been optioning articles in magazines. The film Hustlers with Jennifer Lopez was an article which was in Touch magazine. And somebody just said, "I want to option that article." And then they used that as the basis to go away and get someone to write a script. And then they got J-Lo on board, and then they had a movie. You know,
think
we read different things. We should just think about how we can use that differently. The other point, and this is where the collective may come in useful, how do we build our connections with the biggest and most underserved, audience group in the world, which is Black Africa? You know, Black Africa is there. And yet I don't know how to really access it in an intelligent way, an organized way, an operationalized way. But there is a massive market there with a very young audience who are still moving on to digital devices. You know, digital things like cable are still growing out there. You know, there is a massive opportunity space there for us, for our ideas, working
definitely.
with them and delivering content to them that I just don't think we've explored.
I think you're completely right, and it was interesting. We did an AI workshop with a young man in Nigeria, Lagos, who's an AI filmmaker, and it was just quite mind blowing to hear him talk about using AI to bring these projects to life, and AI kind of leveling the playing fields and being, wanting to kind of collaborate. So I definitely agree, and I think a lot of the conversations we've had over the week or so has been about looking for new markets, and the world is opening up, isn't there? There's all these new markets that are opening up that we might not have considered before, kind of considered before, that people should be exploiting and looking at. Do you know what I mean? So, Pat, I mean, obviously you've kind of spoken and you've kind of been quite real in terms of where you see the industry at the moment. What's keeping you up at night?
Apart from war in the Middle East,
Mm.
well, I think things might get worse before they get better. I mean, if Trump wins, the world goes to hell in a handbasket, I think, very, very quickly. But if Harris wins, we'll all breathe a big sigh of relief. But I fear it might end up a bit like Labour are doing at the moment, which is no vision and all sort of managerialism. So that does keep me up, because fascism, and you only have to look at what's happening in Germany and in France and in Hungary, it feeds off the disillusionment of the white working class. And there's plenty to be disillusioned about. So that keeps me up. The state of our industry keeps me up, because I just don't see where the recovery comes from. It's interesting. I talked to somebody from Scottish TV the other day. They say the ad market is picking up. You know, I hear similar things at ITV. So the advertising income's coming back, Channel 4. So they're starting to spend more money. But I think they're all going to this sort of fewer, bigger, better box set type approach. And there aren't enough people commissioning who understand our stories when we tell them to them. So even if we tell them our story, they then turn it into the version of our story that they understand.
I think absolutely, absolutely.
And that is frustrating, and it's actually quite boring for audiences. And I sort of, we got black capital now. There are lots of black people actually with money. Can we find an intelligent way to get them to put their money into our creative content, whether that's as an investment fund or some sort of mechanism that they get a return on their money, but they also do some good with it. They help these stories get told. We don't need a broadcaster to distribute our stories anymore. We just need the money to make them so that we can distribute them ourselves. So if we can find low cost ways of making them and identify people who can cover that cost in exchange for a return, then maybe we operate in parallel and adjacent spaces to where everything else is at.
Just to remind everybody, that was a really nice cue up, that we've launched a content fund, which is kind of loosely based on a partner system. And on Friday, I hope you guys have all been invited. But on Friday, we kind of celebrate the festival, the close of the festival, with a drinks reception. But one lucky attendee of the festival will be winning £5,000 as our kind of launch, as we kind of encourage you guys to get more involved. It's kind of based similar to kind of a lottery basis. So once people pay in monthly, we have a kind of external company that manages the prize given, and there's a £25,000 cash prize up for grabs every month, and we'll be doing smaller prizes just to kind of encourage or see if we can get a little bit more economics or some funds that go into people can continue to make content and develop content, particularly in this sticky time. So please make sure, if you have been invited to Friday, I think all of you guys have been invited, make sure you RSVP as soon as possible, because it's limited space, obviously. Pat, you coming on Friday? Will we see you there on Friday?
You won't, because I'm in Cardiff, and I'm at the Film and TV charity on Friday. See, one of the things I'm doing is I'm sort of they do their freelancer event every last Friday of the month, and I'm just going to go down there, and basically people can book in and talk.
Yeah.
So last Friday of every month, I'm going to be at Film and TV charity supporting what they do.
Yep.
So
If anyone
I'll be
wants
down
to
there.
connect, yeah, but if anybody family wants to connect with you, they should kind of connect with you down there. It's quite a bleak picture. I've been speaking to some producers in America, and they've been calling this moment, the disruption. I suppose that speaks to what you're saying about finding new ways to get content out there and collaborate. Do you think that kind of, like you're saying, like looking further afield, trying to collaborate with people internationally and just kind of looking at different places we can get our content out there? A lot of people have also talked about brands, and I know in the past you've worked with companies that have dealt with the brands. Are brands another good way to connect? And is there any advice on the best ways to connect with them in terms of funding?
Brands are a good way to connect and to get content out there. The person who knows this area far better than me, though, is Darren Lawford. brand funded content came along sort of in the twilight of my career. I'm not going to pretend it's an area that I'm particularly strong at, and it's not an area that I really worked to build relationships. But yeah, brands obviously. I mean,
Mhm.
you look at the early career of Spike Lee. I mean, he filmed "She's Gonna Have It" on his credit cards, and he did the Nike commercials with Michael Jordan, and then he was off. And
Yeah.
that was before Michael Jordan was Michael Jordan. Um, so branded content and brand funded content is good. I mean, for all the doom and gloom, some of the people, I'm sure some of the people in this session are probably getting more views on YouTube or Instagram or whatever they're placing content than TV shows are on traditional TV networks. I mean, the challenge is how do you monetize it and get paid for it? That's the that's the challenge. Now, if you've got a piece of content that you could show got to 1 million people or 500,000 people, that is worth getting into a conversation or trying to get into a conversation with a brand because 500,000 people are 500,000 people. And if you connect with 500,000 people on a digital platform, they know who they are, where they came from, where they went to, how much of it they watched, which is totally different to what you get on broadcast television, where they got no idea how many people are watching, what they actually sat through, what they took away from it, or who they are. So, YouTube branded. I'm not going to pretend to understand TikTok. And that's general, just accept your limits. But if you get a piece of content that pops there, that is a calling card. And it's a way of making money.
And we just to
We've
add
got to
to
be
that,
better at that.
yeah, and again, for those who are interested in how to monetize content on TikTok, we have our last session on Friday afternoon. I'm sure as we round up, Lily will let you know what time, or if you go into the schedule, we have a session with somebody from the TikTok team or works closely with TikTok who can talk very clearly or really answer any questions about how to monetize and how to get your content out there and the ways that you can be using TikTok effectively. Because like you, Pat, I feel like that one missed me by. I'm trying to jump on it, but I'm not fully understanding it. So trying to understand the best ways. And I think we had a session earlier on with natural filmmaker Karina Thomas, and she spoke about wildlife and natural film, not necessarily, or some of those specialist factual genres not really finding a place on TikTok. So that space is really wide open. We have Natty. What a realist. This is so needed and a refreshing perspective. So I've just pop this up. Natty's just saying that he really appreciates your candor in this conversation. Oh, and thank you, Pat, for putting in that people can apply for kind of service. Agree, Rose. And I really appreciate your kind of candor in terms of where the industry is at and what people should be doing to survive. So kind of going back to portfolio careers,
Mhm.
decide what it is that why you want to do this, kind of look at opportunities that you really love or passions, kind of where you can kind of explore your passions and your kind of advice, given the kind of uncertainty of current the TV and where it might be in the next couple of years, that people should start really thinking about where else we should kind of go. Double state that. Hold on. Let me see. Let's pop this up on. Please note, as Pat says, double the time stated commitments is required, like trustees, not because some meetings, but as I know, yeah. Okay, that's kind of just good to know. Just comments that are in the chat. Is any guy? Have you guys got any more questions? I can't believe that me and Pat have answered so succinctly any questions that you might have
Come on, there must
about.
be somebody out there who thinks that's all bullshit.
Yeah,
Come on.
and that's okay to share and discuss kind of your thoughts and career the opportunities, and I might even call some people out in terms of Panish, you've been quite vocal, and I know that you were talking about doing directing and kind of audio books and stuff like that. Please drop into chat. Has creating a portfolio career something that you've ever considered? Oh, he's on it. I did. I wish I did. I think it were. Palace, have you ever considered? Let me see if I can cheekily call you on stage. Um, I'm really yes, wonderful. Wonderful. I'm really intrigued to see how many of you guys are actually currently considering portfolio careers and any of the things, challenges or rewards that you can doing it. Hi, Paul, thanks for joining us again on stage. Are you currently considering a portfolio career, or do you currently have a portfolio career?
Me, Lord, I think I've had a portfolio career since the moment I started 25 years ago. I mean, I parachuted into TV with a documentary road movie I made with Christopher Hitchens, for a few grand, and got that on Channel 4, but that seemed to me to be the time when TV was starting to do what Pat says it's doing now. In other words, for many of us, that was a point at which we wanted to quit TV. Even when I just started, I found that the meetings I was having with commissioning editors was so dispiriting, and the space available for intelligent documentary work, which is what I wanted to do, seemed so small that I thought, well, I'm not sure I can, focus entirely on TV. I'm going to have to do a lot of other things, which I would really enjoy anyway. So I started and ran a series of public talks for The Economist around Britain and Europe, and then the pro bono bit that fed that as well was working for the Hay Festival just as a a vice president, that sort of thing, and then bringing in the next thing I want to bring in is voice performance and yeah, I've always mixed these things up, and I can't imagine not doing it. And I think it can be really, really satisfying, but it's also incredibly difficult and taxing with regard to kind of the mental health side of things. You've got to be sure that you can be self-directed. And sometimes it's freelance heaven, sometimes it's freelance hell.
It's lonely. It can be lonely. The biggest change I found was sort of when I was at the BBC, I never had to think about going to lunch because somebody on one of the desks around you would go for lunch, and then somebody else would go, and off you go to lunch, and you go together, and sometimes you go alone. When you're just working, I mean, I could sit in this room for 8 hours, 10 hours, just being busy. And also working from home changes your home from your home to an office, and it changes your entire relationship with your home. So it's not all upside, and that's what I say, you have to really be ready to say goodbye to what it was you're doing before if you want to do this seriously. And that is different to I need 2 or 3 jobs to pay the bills.
Thank you, Palace. That's really helpful. I see that we've got a question from Nancy. Thank you, Palace. I really appreciate you. I'll put that up on stage because we've got only a few minutes left. Do you think it's more preferable to get a buzz on social media first before shopping your ideas to bigger platforms?
Yes, I do, because there's nothing like being able to show people who often may not understand what it is you want to do, or may not have met you, or may not know what your abilities are to execute, that not only was it done, but it was popular. And here are the people that came to it. I'm involved in a podcast with my brother called Over the Top and Under the Radar. And we are trying to get it's actually quite an interesting story, because first of all, we've said to our listeners, we're doing this for free at the moment. Well, we're self-funding this at the moment. The freelancers are being paid, but the talent aren't being paid. Unedited isn't being paid. We're just paying the people who do the work. And if you want this to carry on, we need you to support us. And we're probably now nearly at 50% of our monthly cost, just coming from donations from people who like what we're doing and want us to keep doing it.
Wow.
Which is interesting. But also, we are trying to talk to sponsors who align with what we're trying to do. And so we did a quick survey of our listeners, those who've signed up to the newsletter. And what you then get is, all right, our audience isn't young, our audience is sort of 25 to 50, which in advertising terms is fine. But you start to understand who it is that's coming to your particular party. And if you do stuff on social media, not only can you say to the broadcaster, this sketch was seen by 3 million people, but you can say, and 75% of them were under the age of 25, and 60% of them gave them a thumbs up, and half of them forwarded it to somebody else. And that sort of data they can't argue with, because you've got evidence. You're showing that it's not just an idea. Here it is in practice, and I've taken the risk of putting it out there, and I can show you. And so areas, especially areas like comedy, where there's very limited sort of network demand for comedy, and a lot of the space is for taken. If you've got a talent, or if you've got a sketch, just one great sketch can open a door to getting someone to maybe help you with a script editor, or someone to do 2 sketches, 3 sketches. So digital is definitely worth it as a way of getting up there.
I think that one of the things that's coming really across is that you've really got to be committed and passionate. And we kind of say, we've been saying it for a little while, that this time it's survival of the most committed. So you've got to really kind of lean
and you've got to
into.
be entrepreneurial.
Yep.
And you've got to be really sort of forward looking. So everything you can do when you're working to create space for when the times are hard, whether that's pay down your mortgage or put money aside for rent when you're not working, anything you can do when you are working in order to cover these times when things will be harder is absolutely worth doing. How many of you lecture? Most of you could lecture at a university. Most of you, because you understand the industry, there's more media studies graduates every year than there are jobs in the industry. So you're real practitioners. These are just ways of generating income to keep you going.
Okay. All right. Well, just before, we've got our final question from Palacios, and he answers, have you any thoughts on specific methods of time management in a career or in a portfolio career? Any kind of advice around time management? I know you said you had to get an assistant to help you manage your diary.
I had to get an assistant also, just to put up. So when we were trying to organize this, I'd say to you, can you contact Philippa and she'll sort it out? I think you need to set aside time to do the admin, and the admin isn't just responding to emails. It's making sure that you've got all your receipts, that you've claimed back all of the money that you can claim back. You've got a decent accountant that can do your book. So many of us come unstuck because we haven't got the accounting.
Oh my God, tell me about it.
And then I think anything that people ask you to do, you have to assume it's going to take 50 to 100% more time than they've asked for, because we know when we ask people to do something, we say, yeah, it's only going to be a couple of hours, when we know it's 3 or 4 hours. So you have to assume that the time request is probably going to be 50 to 100% more than they've asked for. And then you have to be honest with yourself. Because sometimes you have to look at something you're doing and you have to say to yourself, am I still enjoying this? Am I still getting something out of this? But it's not easy. I'm an extrovert. I get my energy from being around other people. It's not easy to be the lone ranger when if you're an introvert. It's great. No one bothering you. None of that noisy office rubbish that you have to put up with. You can just get on with it. So I would often, so I'm going to go to film and TV charity on Friday. I would go to BAFTA. I would go to places where there is activity and there are people, and I could still sit down and put my headphones on and do my work, but I'm doing it in the presence of others. Even understand yourself really, really well. There's a really good test. Simon Sinek. Where's the chat? Simon Sinek. He wrote a very good book called Start With Why. And that's really asking yourself, what is it you uniquely bring to the party? And he does an exercise where he said the quick version of this, and you shouldn't do it with your family or your spouse, is to ask your friend, why are you my friend?
Okay.
And he says they'll start off initially with the really simple stuff. Oh, you make me laugh. Yeah, but lots of people make you laugh. Why am I your friend? And they'll go and go and go until they start telling you the role you play in their life. And that is, and often, and I've done it a few times, you get broadly the same sort of thing coming back to you. And then you sort of realize that's okay, that's what I bring to the party. Where are the parties that is going to be really welcome, that I can really flourish?
Yeah.
So self-knowledge, self-awareness is crucial if you want to have a portfolio, any sort of portfolio career. And for those who are doing what our parents did, the equivalent of the 2 or 3 jobs to keep the lights on, I applaud you and I commend you. And I mean, most of us have been in that phase of our career. I remember when I lost my job in local government, I worked for Bernie Grant, and I was freelancing for The Voice, and I was freelancing for the Sunday Correspondent. You do get those times in your career. But there will come a point where you just have to ask yourself honestly, is it worth the candle? Or are there other ways that I can get what I get from film or TV, creatively, emotionally, but that pay the bills?
Wow. Food for thought. What an amazing way to kind of end the session. There's definitely a lot of food for thought and a lot of honesty within there. And I know that lots of people are kind of been having these thoughts. I think you've given additional food for thought in terms of where people's careers are at and what they want to achieve. And more importantly, I think like the start with the why is so key. Why are we doing this? You know, what is the purpose of doing this? Thank you so much, guys. That's been amazing.